everyone. My name is Chelsea. I'm the Director of People and Compliance at Codesmith. So that means I do a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but I have been at Codesmith for a bit of time. So I also worked on the admission side, on the program side back in the day. So I've done a little bit of everything here, but I'm so excited to moderate today's panel with Oddball co-founders Travis and Rob, who are here to share how they started Oddball from the ground up and just talk about the exciting world of entrepreneurship and tech. So thank you so much for joining everyone today. We're really excited. So without further ado, let's get into the whole panel. So Travis and Rob, can you start by telling us who you are, what you do at Oddball, how long you have worked in tech, and how you are connected to Codesmith? Travis, you can start if you don't mind.
Sure. Travis Sorensen, co-founder and CEO of Oddball. What do I do? Well, so we are organized by functional area, and we have the growth team, the recruiting team, the operations team, and the finance team, or as I like to call them, the people who find the work, the people who find the people to do the work, the people who do the work, and the people who make sure we are profitable and don't go to jail. And I sit in two of those seats. I sit in the growth seat, and I sit in the finance seat. And then I also sit in what's called the integrator seat, which is the CEO seat. So I kind of mediate the disputes between the division heads, which is a tough situation when the growth team has a dispute with the finance team. But generally speaking, my job is mostly to manage people at this point. Whenever I actually try to do some work, I mostly just get in the way. So that's a new role for me as we grow. I'll turn it over to Rob.
Sure, thanks, Travis. My name is Rob Wilkinson. I'm CTO and co-founder over here at Oddball. I wear a lot of different hats, mainly focused on technical solutioning, figuring out what problems need to be solved, and going ahead and finding the right people and the solutions to solve them. I think your other questions, I've been in the tech industry since about 2012 at this point, and yeah, I'm excited about this panel. It should be good to work with Codesmith and hopefully answer some questions and talk a little bit about our story.
Yeah, and can each of you quickly cover your connection to Codesmith?
Yeah, sure. I forgot to say, I've worked in the tech industry since I started at Codesmith. My connection to Codesmith is I believe I'm the first student. Is that right, Rob? Yeah, I was the first student. And so prior to business school, I taught GMAT, which is like the SAT for business school. And I worked for a company called Veritas Prep, which is was owned at the time by Chad Tretwine, who is one of the owners of Codesmith. And so he and I had been talking about entrepreneurship because I wanted to start a company and had no idea how to do it. And he said, well, I'm starting this coding boot camp. And, we're looking for good candidates for our first class. Why don't you come down to LA? And so I did that. And the very first minutes, I met Rob in the parking lot. And then we had a rather awkward interaction about 20 minutes later, where I was his student and he was my instructor, but neither of us knew actually what was going on. So I'll turn it over to you, Rob.
Yeah, sure. So I had, so my connection to Codesmith, I'd been teaching at another coding boot camp. And one of my former graduates was working as a mentor at Codesmith and had kind of gotten a job working for them. One thing led to another, kind of brought me over, introduced me to Will, had a chance to meet Chad Tretwine, get to know them a little bit better. And I was really excited about the fact that Codesmith was teaching a full stack JavaScript curriculum, which wasn't necessarily the norm back in 2015. That wasn't a thing that you saw every day. A lot of places were doing just a wide variety of things. So that was exciting. And I took the jump, and I was the first lead instructor of the Codesmith campus when it was out in Marina Del Rey, before it even moved over to Venice.
Wow, so we have some very early Codesmith connections. That's very cool. Well, thank you both for all of that info. I actually wanted to go a little bit deeper into your backgrounds. So Rob, you mentioned you used to teach at Codesmith back in 2015. Can you share a little bit more about what led you to teaching at Codesmith and kind of what inspired you to take your career in that direction? Yeah,
sure. So when I graduated college, I didn't get a CS degree. I'm not a I'm not a computer science person. I got a degree in econ, but I had gotten lucky and sort of stumbled into the tech industry back in PHP days. Then I moved on and did a little bit of Ruby on Rails. And in 2014, I had the chance to work on a team for something called Rails Girls. They were doing a Summer of Code event that was in LA. So work with this team of people who were relatively new to coding. They were still figuring out the basics. And I had a really good experience kind of working with them side by side and supporting that team. And wanted to keep that going forward. So I got a job working at another coding boot camp. They reached out and I helped kick off was one of the first instructors at their downtown LA campus. And it kind of grew from there. I found it was something that I liked doing. And then sort of, like I said earlier, one of my former students ended up being a mentor at Codesmith, and that was my connection to get into the Codesmith ecosystem, at least.
And Rob, what was your favorite part about the Codesmith community?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, Travis can probably speak to this too, but I really like the fact that there was a kind of an open-ended scope of what you could do as your final project while having support and guidance. Like Travis's final project that led up to us sort of starting Oddball was way different than anybody, was different than other people's, and other people were different from him. There was sort of like wide open scope that you could do. But you also had the ability to like escalate and get help from mentors if you needed to as well, right? If stuff was, if things were going badly or you were really struggling, you could get support. It was different than a lot of other boot camps that would be a little bit more structured. Like your final project would be a Yelp clone or something like that, right? Codesmith sort of said you could do whatever you wanted, and we'll help you figure it out as you go along.
Nice. And then Travis, can you talk a little bit more about what led you from the military to joining a coding program and what inspired you to take that direction in your career?
Sure. Wow, the military. So I got out of the military in 2009. Same year I graduated college, and after that, so I studied economics as well, and I went to go work for the Federal Reserve for a bit as an analyst, and then I worked as a management consultant for Accenture. Then I went to business school, and in business school, I really was trying to like start a company around the idea that I could be an inventor, which sounds laughable at this point, but this is actually a very common thing for MBA candidates to do. We're not a very smart group. We're like really good at this thing and we're really terrible at this other thing, and we're all like, oh, I want to be that guy. And so, but I kept getting to this one point where I'd say, okay, I have this idea for this product. I've done a little market research, and I think that there's something there. I'd like to build it. And they'd say, great, let's build a prototype. It'll cost you $20,000. I'd say, okay, well, I don't have $20,000. So how do we do this? And they're like, well, can you raise money? And no, I can't. So that was sort of the end of every entrepreneurship journey in business school. So after business school, I just decided, a friend of mine basically pointed me to tech. They're like, you could build your own prototypes if you knew how to code. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. That's a really cool idea. So I moved to Oakland and actually lived with Jeannie. We were roommates for a long time. We were friends in business school, and she got a real job after business school, unlike myself. And I don't know how she put up with me, but I was basically just trying to start a company, trying to start a tech company. I knew nothing about tech, so instead of running into the prototype problem, I'd run into this problem where I'd talk to other coders, or I'd talk to entrepreneurs, or I'd talk to private equity people, and they'd all come back to the same problem, which was essentially, Travis, you don't know anything about tech. Why on earth would anybody back you to start a tech company? And so, well, how do I learn about tech? And they'd all kind of shrug their shoulders and say, like, I don't know. And so started trying to learn about tech. And that was what led to my conversation with Chad about his coding bootcamp. But yeah, I mean, mostly fits and starts. I tried a lot of the online resources, and I really just didn't have the discipline or the aptitude, whatever you want to call it, to teach it myself. Rob sells himself a little short. Rob actually just taught himself how to code by just opening a book and reading it. And I think that was always really impressive to me as I beat my head against the wall trying to learn a very simple language relative to PHP. So yeah, that's probably how that's my journey.
Well, it sounds like it worked out in the end. But what was your favorite part about being a resident at Codesmith?
So this is going to sound odd, but I mean it in a loving way. Codesmith felt a lot like basic training sometimes. It was very long hours, but it was a camaraderie that I hadn't really felt since my time in the military. And I remember this one time I was, as per usual, struggling with a very simple problem. And Rob and this friend of ours, Sam, who was working at Codesmith at the time as well, they just started singing this song about how code doesn't care. And it went something like, like code doesn't care. And then Rob would say, it doesn't care if you're tired. And then Sam would say, it doesn't care. It doesn't care if you're hungry. It doesn't care. It doesn't care if you think you're right. It doesn't care. And it was just this like maddening moment where I'm like ready to smash my keyboard. And I was like, why won't you help me? But they were helping me by not telling me the answer. And eventually I did solve the problem. So just those sorts of fun moments.
Amazing. Sounds like Codesmith the musical. I'd watch it.
Yeah.
Well, you're both here as a pair, also because you started Oddball together. So was starting your own digital agency always the plan from the start, or did it slowly come together as you both started collaborating?
Rob, you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. So basically what happened with Oddball, Travis's final project, right? He built this tool and he had some connections and he basically shopped it around and basically got someone who was like, hey, we really like this idea. We'd pay you if you built it for real. So we both thought that was a pretty good idea. But the thing was, they said that they wanted to buy it on an exclusionary license. So you could only sell to them and could never sell it to anybody else. When you hear something like that, usually, it means that you have something special that other people would want to buy and they're trying to keep it for themselves. So Travis and me, we sort of met and I knew about this project and we were like, okay, well, maybe we can make a go of this and make this project into a thing, So we both, Travis was working was sort of a resident at Codesmith. I was working at Codesmith. We kind of jumped ship and started working on that product. Well, fast forward 6 months later, and we had sold exactly one license of that product for $1,500, which was less than the $5,000 they had originally going to give us. We kind of realized, okay, this isn't really a product. This is a feature of a larger product, right? Someone should buy this and add it to this really complicated digital tool suite that they have. But we didn't have any funding. We didn't know what we were doing. So, but during that time, we have gotten pretty good at figuring out software development. Like I was good at building software, but we also got a lot better at dealing with this customer and understanding their requirements, being able to translate that into code and mapping out sprints and doing things like that, and just being able to write quality software. So we sort of pivoted and we said, well, let's see if we can turn this into an agency and see if we can we like working with each other and we like the work that we're doing. Maybe we can make a go of this and start working with customers. So we kind of gave that a try. And I remember, I think our first deal that we ever closed was, Travis, what was it, 5 weeks for almost no money. But we got it done and we sort of built it from there. But it definitely wasn't a straightforward journey. Like a lot of entrepreneurs seem to end up with a path. And, I'm sure this is a story that other entrepreneurs tell where your path is very zigzaggy, right? And there's lots of failures, there's lots of successes, and you end up dealing with roadblocks. And oftentimes, like what's the great example? Slack is a chat tool that we all use. Where did Slack start out? As like a virtual reality video game idea that someone had. And then as part of it was a chat feature. And that's really what everybody liked. And then they just started working on that. And now Slack is this huge multi-billion-dollar product that, I swear at some point it feels like a good percent of the globe is on it every single day. So it definitely wasn't straightforward. Like we started as a product and moved to services, started working commercial. And then, federal was just something that we both like solving these sort of difficult problems. A lot of our early clients were things like dashboards or complicated sort of spreadsheet-like interfaces or complicated, really nested forms, right? They weren't sort of simple WordPress websites. They were more complex things. And nobody gets more complex than the federal government in a lot of cases, right? With some of the way that they do things. So there was a natural fit there. We met up with some right people and sort of moved into that space in 2017. And since then, we've grown quite a bit and work with a wide variety of different agencies.
Nice. And you touched on some roadblocks that you had encountered, but what would you say was the greatest challenge that you faced building Oddball into what it is today?
I think we've had a lot of challenges. I think a lot of the challenges that we've faced have been understanding, for me personally, understanding my own shortcomings, what I'm good at, what I'm not, sort of being comfortable with that, and then knowing when to ask for help. A lot of times as a business is small and it's only two people, both people are sort of doing everything at all times. And that doesn't scale as you grow, right? Like you can't have two people sort of always putting out fires and all hands on deck. It's important to understand what you're good at and what you're not, and focus on the things that are sort of your special skill. That's what I would say is probably one of my biggest sort of learnings as you've grown. Travis, I don't know if you have something similar or different.
So there was this moment in when we started Oddball. Well, when we actually started making a few dollars, and I had taken accounting twice in college. I took it in business school, and I worked at the Federal Reserve, and I didn't truly understand what the different impact between accrual and cash-based accounting was until it was like, oh, we have to make payroll today, and we don't have any cash. So that's why people care about cash-based accounting. And we had a lot of moments like that where we sort of like heard of something or learned something. And one of the big things was that a partnership is a marriage. And it's like, Rob and I, in many ways, are married. Like we're going to go have a nice romantic dinner in Waco, Texas next week, because that's halfway between, where he lives in Austin and where I live in Dallas. And it takes a lot of work, and we're very different people, but we complement each other very well. And that was a tough road for both of us, but I think we came out the other end much stronger.
Yeah, that's very understandable. So just bringing it back to your time at Codesmith, how does the community at Codesmith, in your opinion, foster that spirit of entrepreneurship? Either of you can take this one.
Just shared suffering, right?
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Rob.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, I agree with Travis. You're sort of in a cohort with a bunch of other people who are working really, really hard, striving for a goal. And for some people, like maybe they've never sort of had that experience, right, of putting in and really going that 110%. I think the other thing that Codesmith sort of proffers too is a lot of people are coming to Codesmith as a secondary career, and they're signing up and sort of taking the plunge on this heavy commitment. And they're taking a big risk too, right? You're setting aside a large chunk of your time, and you're betting on something that you're excited about and you think you can turn into something greater. I mean, there's a very entrepreneurship is definitely about risk, but you learn other things too. You learn how to sort of scramble. You learn how to do a lot of the things in early stage entrepreneurship where you're sort of scrambling, figuring things out on the fly, stuff like that, right? So I'd say that even though Codesmith doesn't have direct entrepreneurial classes around cash flows and stuff like that, right? You're learning a lot of these skills about what it means to be sort of by yourself or with a small team and sort of having to, make or break it almost, right? Or fake it till you make it.
Yeah, you mentioned scrambling, and I definitely saw a lot of scrambling day to day on campus, but it always worked out. So in regards to life after Codesmith, what do you feel were the most valuable lessons or skills you learned that you think have helped you to be successful?
I would say I really appreciated the culture that was fostered at Codesmith. There was this thing that they did. I don't know if you still do it, but there was a thing that they did called circles, and it was very. You still do circles? Okay, awesome. 5 years later, still doing circles. Circles. It was just this sort of I don't know. It was just a way of kind of being vulnerable with your fellow classmates around how difficult this is, and what's on your mind. It's like, I'm afraid that I'm not going to make it, that kind of thing. And it was I didn't really think this answer out very well, so you'll have to forgive me, but it was just a way of breaking down barriers and allowing a community to form around the experiences you're having. And Rob and I have taken that, and we don't do circles, but we do similar things to sort of allow people to be vulnerable at Oddball and allow people to, my favorite thing about Oddball is totally appropriate to roast the CEO, and my growth team does it constantly. And we've seen other CEOs in the space that is not appropriate. but I think it's a very good thing for us, not a bad thing.
Anything you want to add, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I started working at Codesmith, I want to say it was maybe 5 or 6 people. It was me, Will, a few mentors. There was, a couple other people as well, but it was definitely a small company. We didn't have, we had a general idea of what we wanted to do curriculum wise, and we had a space, but that was about it, right? So it definitely was sort of building the ship while we were on it and kind of making it work in flight to sort of figure out what this would look like long term. So I think it's just that ability to sort of scramble and figure things out. I think something else that Codesmith did that was really good that I'd sort of like that Travis mentioned earlier is one thing mentors were pretty good at that we sort of worked with them on was to not really give people the answers right away, but to instead just point them toward documentation, which can be frustrating, but long-term is a way to learn, right? You're sort of giving folks the tools to learn rather than giving them the answer. Teach a man to fish, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's something that's really important. And it's a good way to be a leader too, is to understand the line when that works and when that doesn't, but kind of bring that philosophy into your work life.
Nice. And thinking about Oddball today and looking into the future, how do you see Oddball growing?
I think growing in size, complexity, and capabilities. So when we first started, it was just me and Rob. So, collectively we had 2 skills, right? One, the person who could sell the work and the person who could do the work. And, just little by little, we've added quite a few, finance, recruiting, that sort of stuff. But additionally, we added human-centered design and product management, and we're getting into data analytics and that sort of thing. And I wouldn't say that there's like a direct the ability to sort of like admit what you don't know so that you can learn it, as opposed to just sort of pretending you know stuff and being afraid to actually dive in because you'll be wrong. I think that was a really great thing that Codesmith gave us.
Anything you want to add to that, Rob?
Sorry, I had to sneeze. Yeah, as Travis said, continue to grow. Like, our focus has always been to sort of deliver these great services that citizens can use, whether it's on via.gov, whether it's on healthcare.gov or mymedicare.gov, and just sort of expand that, right? Government delivering services that are on par with what people expect in 2021, I think is where we want to go, and sort of, we all know websites that are great, and websites that aren't so great. So sort of focus on that.
And Oddball is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. So if you don't mind, could you dive into why veterans are important to you and how you are supporting the veteran community?
Sure. Yeah. So, veterans sacrifice for our country, and we owe them a debt of gratitude for that. So, Rob and I always from the beginning, I think when we were like maybe 4 people, we were supporting something called Patriot Boot Camp because they supported us, and it was a great thing. And so, for us to be able to get back to Codesmith and be able to get back to the veteran community in this way is really important for us.
Yeah, so we have recently launched the Veterans Coding Scholarship powered by Oddball, which has been very exciting. What propelled Oddball to offer this scholarship? You kind of touched on it, but anything else you wanted to mention?
Well, specifically to the veterans, well, mostly it's a bit selfish thing. I experience share it with others. I don't know if my internet's jumping in and out, but the ability to go to Codesmith. When I signed up for Codesmith, I'd also gotten into another coding boot camp whose name shall remain, not spoken, but that was like $17,000, which is definitely would have been worth the investment, but it's a really tough thing to make the jump in those situations where you're saying, okay, I'm going to make this $17,000 investment. I don't even know what coding boot camps cost now, but. So for us to be able to give that experience to veterans and give them the ability to, become the next Oddball, it's something that's very exciting.
I agree. And why do you think a program like Codesmith is a good fit for veterans looking to make that change and move into the tech sector?
Yeah, well, as I said, I think Codesmith there's one thing like the military does very poorly, which is people, the civilian world. They do a great job of transitioning civilians into the military world. They don't do a very good job when on the other end of it, which is understandable, but unfortunate as well. And I think Codesmith, the community in Codesmith is very collaborative, and it's a very great place to be. And I think making that transition from something that you're doing to tech is the same sort of difficult transition that you're going to face when you're leaving the military and going into the civilian world. So I think going to a place like Codesmith is definitely a really real positive thing for a lot of people.
And this is my last question from myself, at least. What is your best advice for those transitioning from the military or other non-traditional backgrounds into the tech space?
That is a tough question. My best advice for people, I don't know. Let me take a minute to think about this. Rob, you got something?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for me, I think there's a lot of things, right? I didn't graduate the CS degree, but the way that I found success in tech was through going to a lot of meetups and networking a lot to find out what's happening and what skills are out there and things like that. I think that's just so important to know that you're studying the right things and you're learning the right things, and just keeping abreast of what's sort of hot in the industry, and for a couple of different reasons, right? It's like that's the ability to find future jobs, future opportunities, future partners, people you want to work with, things like that. And then also you already have some common language if you do meet them. I mean, a pretty common story amongst people I know is they went to meetups a few times, they kept seeing the same people. Then those people said that they were hiring, and they walked up and shook their hand at the end of the meetup and had a conversation around it, right? They'd already met each other and talked like 6 times at that point. So there's just a lot of opportunities there. So I think networking is always going to be important. And then, for your first job, I think take what you can get, like to get through the door in the tech industry, and then grow from there. Like I remember working with an engineer at one point who he got a job as a QA engineer on a team, but he didn't just kind of end it there. Like he would wake up early, he had to start work at 9, and he would like spend the morning from like 6:30 to 7:30. He would be studying. This is back in Angular days. He was like studying Angular, right, for like an hour every morning, and then he would close his laptop on Angular and he would go to work, right? Like, and that's what he did to sort of go ahead and kind of keep moving forward. He didn't have the ability to sort of take time off full time, but he wanted to sort of make and grow where he could. Tech industry is always changing, right? What you know now is not what you need to know in 5 years, right? Nothing is eternal. So I think it's important to sort of study really hard and stay abreast of what's current, and don't let yourself become a dinosaur. So those would be my things: networking and kind of studying.
Yeah, thank you both. So we have one question in the chat from Michael, and then I'll open it up to anyone if you all want to raise your hand or just jump in if you have a question. But Michael asked, did you bootstrap or take on investment when you started?
Yeah, we bootstrapped. Rob and I didn't take a salary for about 8 months, and then that was actually a really good thing for us, because it forced us to really face the fact that our product was not going to be successful. And had we had runway, I think we could have lied to ourselves for another couple of years about it. But facing that sort of like, hey, I don't have any money for rent this month, we better make something happen. I think it's a good forcing function. But going back to that last question, I do have some advice. I think my advice is aggressively seek out mentors. It's something that a lot of I really do think that one of the reasons we've been so successful is both Rob and myself really cultivate a group of mentors and really lean on them. There's a lot of stuff that you don't know, and there's a lot of stuff that other people do know and are happy to share with you, and it's really just a matter of kind of asking the question.
Amazing advice. Thank you, Travis. We have a question. I'd like to ask what experience has been from transitioning between QA and dev or DevOps. Is transitioning between those functions encouraged after a set amount of time, like 1 year or more? Any advice on that?
Yeah, sort of making the jump. I remember talking to someone at one point who they were working as a DevOps engineer, as a sysadmin, basically at a Windows shop. And they wanted to get into sort of like a more of a Linux DevOps role. And they were at a pretty large company. And my advice to them was like, those Linux like systems and those tasks, those are happening at your current company. You're just not connected into that work. Like, go and see if you can find that work as special projects within your current company and do it there, right? Rather than taking a big plunge. But there are QA projects or DevOps projects that are happening, and sort of volunteering and raising your hand and seeing if you can get your manager to push you into those can be a way to try your hand at it. That's relatively low risk, you know. There's also open source things that you can do and hackathons and stuff like that to sort of practice. But if your current job can sort of train you to do it, it's like the best case scenario, right? I don't know if that answers your question at all, or if you were talking about something else.
I think that answered the question, but we'll see if they put anything else in the chat. If anyone else has a question, you can write it in the chat, speak it out loud, raise your hand. Caitlin, amazing submission. How quickly did Oddball scale in regards to size of team?
So I would say that we think of it as percentages. We kind of we go through like periods where we double, and now we kind of go through periods where we increase by 33%. And generally speaking, and I'm sure that number will continue to shrink. But so when we first started, it was just me and Rob, and then we added another coding bootcamp grad, and she worked with us for maybe 6 months before we added another person, and then the four of us worked for a while. And then we kind of went, then when we got connected in the federal space, we started kind of growing in a linear fashion. And so it was kind of one a month for a while. And then when we started winning prime programs, it was more like, okay, you've now won this program, I need you to fill 10 positions, or I need you to fill 30 positions. And we currently have 17 positions open and looking to fill them quickly. I don't want to anger the contracting gods too badly, but we are hopeful that we're having more positions in the near future.
Nice. And how big is your engineering team right now?
74.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, we got a lot of engineers and wide range of skill sets. Most of our work is between full stack JavaScript. We have some Ruby on Rails, some DevOps, and some Java work too. So a little bit of a range of skill sets.
Nice. Jose says, what's your leadership and management approach for a team of sales reps? And how do you go about B2B sales and brand building? Also, you might all see these questions too. I don't know. I'm just reading them for you.
No, you're doing great, Chelsea. Thank you. So we don't do business to business. We do business to government. But when we did do business to business, it was just me doing the business development. Well, that's not true. I would rope Rob into it. And I would say, what was our approach? Our approach was essentially to get in front of people and impress them with our skills, and then follow up until they said yes. And the problem with that was sometimes you felt a little bit of urgency that wasn't there. I think this kind of culminated in a learning moment for us when we had a meeting with someone in Marina Del Rey, and he wanted to meet on Friday afternoon specifically, and I was sick and had a fever. And so Rob and I went to the meeting, and I just said, listen, I'm not gonna be able to say anything. I just need you to carry this meeting. And I was literally just sweating bullets in the meeting. And that was, we never actually closed that deal. I wonder if it was because I kind of looked maybe a little suspicious sweating in the meeting. But on the business and government side, generally speaking, there's kind of three functions. There's business development, which is a combination of just research and but both like kind of quantitative research and qualitative research. Quantitative research, you're saying, okay, where is the government spending money on what we offer, and where are they doing modernization as opposed to legacy work? And then qualitative research is, who do you know in the industry? Who do you know not just on the government side, but who do you know on the other contractor side, and forming teams to go after work. That's very common in the government space. And then there's what's called capture, which is a very suspicious term for a very essentially a capture manager's job is to ensure that you are submitting a compliant proposal. So currently, one of our capture managers, Will, is working on something called Polaris. And Polaris is what's called a government-wide acquisition contract, or a GWAC. And this is essentially a points game, right? There's 100,000 points available. Why not 10,000? I don't know. But there's 100,000 points available, and it sort of becomes a game of Sudoku, essentially. You're saying, okay, well, if we go down this road, then we'll get 8,000 points, and if we go down this road, we'll get 9,000 points. So well, let's go down this road. But if we go down this road, then we're stuck in this situation. And so that is a very, very complicated work that I am not very good at, but fortunately we have people to do that. And then the final is the proposal phase, which the proposal, it's not really like, okay, this phase is over, now this person did it. It's kind of a trading off of resources. And the proposal phase is just, submit a compelling. Rob does a lot of that work, so I do not envy him on that side.
Thank you for that explanation. It looks like Vahi, and sorry, Vahi, if that's not how you pronounce your name, it has a follow-up question about his switching functions at a company. So he's wondering the best way to kind of initiate that request to start. Any recommendations on how he can approach that, or how they can approach that? And does 1 year suffice to switch between roles?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the timeline, but I can say that most managers I know would be ecstatic if an employee had a conversation with them about improving their skills and sort of taking on a new challenge within the company. And I don't know the timeline on those opportunities. It might be longer than you want, but there could hopefully be something. I don't know about the timeline on it. I would say it's a good conversation. I would love it if people at Oddball, Travis and I, we were talking about some folks who we think could make a good switch to DevOps engineers, and things like that, right?
Thanks. And then we have a question from Terry. He says, knowing you all now have clearly defined roles and areas of expertise within the company, what were some of the challenges you two specifically faced with each other early on in defining or fine-tuning those roles? And how did you handle one or both of you misstepping in an area that you weren't as strong as you intended to be?
Sure, I can give an example of that, Travis. I was going to talk about the company website, which I think is a pretty good example. So in case you haven't figured out, I'm a tech guy, and we go to build a company website. I obviously over-engineer it, right? I want to make it incredibly complicated and super complex. And me and Travis would butt heads pretty often because, his focus at the time was like, let's make it streamlined, let's make it simple. It's got to be good enough so people are excited about it, but it doesn't have to, take you to Mars and back. So we often would butt heads over what we wanted to do and how we wanted to make this happen. So what we did in the beginning part is we came up with roles and responsibilities and who would have input and who would have decisions on these different areas within the business, sat down, had a meeting of it, and really just defined it. So that was something really great for us to sort of say, hey, we said this at the time, we're all on board with this, and we can point to this sort of golden document about this is what we agreed on. Another thing that we did to help with that a little bit later on is implemented a system called EOS. If you want to look it up, it's called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a way to structure your business sort of around roles and responsibilities and things like that. So it's all about really clearly defining those and having those tough conversations with people. One of our mentors early on always used the analogy of burning the brush, right? When you're dealing with somebody and you're sort of interacting with them, stuff sort of builds up and you have to have real conversations to clear the air and have those real conversations about what's happening. And if you don't, it will fester.
Nice. We have a question from Michael. He says, it probably wasn't all sunshine and rainbows all the time. What sucked about starting your own company?
What sucked? Everything. Yeah, it's awful. Yeah, it's something, we just take like one small aspect of it. I mean, Man, I don't even know. It sucks when you fight with your co-founder. It sucks when your first employee quits. It sucks when the best laid plans collapse. It's really great when you have a success and you have somebody to celebrate with. I think sometimes you get a little, especially within the growth team, you get a little bit future focused and you forget to celebrate the wins. And I think it's really important to take the time to say, like, hey, like, we accomplished something. Yes, there's 10 other problems, but we did accomplish this. And our celebrations have, it started off with, we closed our first big deal. I brought a $40 bottle of bourbon to the office, and we drank some of it, and that was our celebration. And we actually wrote the deal name on the we sort of ended that tradition with that. I don't know when that happened. We just kind of stopped doing that tradition. But yeah, I don't know, Rob, you got anything to add on what sucks? I mean, obviously hanging out with me probably sucks.
I think there's a toll when you're starting a company with your family. And I remember having to have like one of my older sisters had me down, was like, dude, you're gonna lose your like long-term girlfriend, like you're just burning yourself out at both ends, right? And sort of understanding that and knowing and having those conversations, that just sucks, right? Like to be sort of shortchanging people in your life. And there's an analogy that Travis likes to use that's sort of like you have a balance with different people in your life, right? That you invest time into those relationships, and you can overdraw that balance too.
And then Michael had a follow-up question. Would you do it again with the benefit of hindsight?
Benefit of hindsight. Well, do we get to know the outcome? I guess. So what I would say is, to be an entrepreneur, you have to be a special kind of stupid. You have to be stupid enough to think you can do it and smart enough to actually be able to do it. Or honestly, you got to get lucky enough to be able to do it. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that. When you meet a serial entrepreneur who's serially successful, that is a very impressive thing. I don't pretend that Rob and I didn't get lucky on this journey. Obviously, we worked hard and made some good moves, but in general, we were extremely lucky. But to answer your question, yeah, we have to do it. Like, if we could tomorrow, we're just gonna start another company.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I think the skills that I learned, whether, I don't know what would have happened if we weren't successful, so I can't speak to that. But I think the skills that I learned within that first 6 months, within that first year, within that first 2 years, and even now today, I'm learning new things almost every day around what it takes to be a leader and what it takes to be a company. Now, Travis and I are in a spot where we have people who are working around and working with us and who are just really, really skilled, and just have these great years of experience, and be able to sit down in a room with folks like that who've been in this industry for such a long time. Like that experience is priceless.
And we have a great question from Brad. As a former service member, what aspects of my service are the best traits or attributes to emphasize when I am interviewing for development jobs?
I'm sure Rob has a better answer than I do, but just take a quick credit. Well, what I would say is your time as a serviceman is a tool in the toolbox, and I would not put that as at the forefront. You are you, and part of you is your journey in the military. And so, more, I'd say what you ought to think about is, if you were this person who is interviewing, what do you think they are looking for? Trying to read the room and understand it, and then understand, like, it is a very strange time to be hired into tech. We had somebody quit today because they want to play basketball during the middle of the day, and our company doesn't allow that. So I would say that you should more think about what it is that you want to get out of the job, because if you can code, somebody will hire you. And the question is, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Rob and I when we started, we had a very strict rule. We're not building Tinder for cats. That was our rule. That's what led us here. And so I would focus on, upskilling yourself, and then figuring out what do you want to do and where are you best going to do that, and is this person interviewing you the person who's going to help you on your journey. So Rob, what do you got?
Yeah, no, I agree, Travis. And to kind of expand on it for to answer Nick's question there around Oddball specific stuff. So Oddball is an agency, but we're a specific type of agency. We work with clients on long-term projects. So a lot of agencies that are out there work with clients, and you'll be working with the client for 2 months, a month, right? And you'll be just churning and burning on little projects. When Oddball works with the government, we partner with them for years, right? So you get to, when you come and work for Oddball on a VA project, you get to know the VA intimately. You at the end, for a year you've been working there, you understand the VA's networks as well as people at the VA, to a degree. You understand their systems, you understand how things work and stuff like that. So I think it's what we look for specifically in our space is sort of engineers who are willing to take that leap and sort of lean in and understand that, right? Our tagline used to be engineers who ask business questions, because there's way too many agencies that are in this world that just sort of go in and they talk to the client and then they go and build them something and it's wrong. Right? It's sort of like we look for engineers who can take that next level and go, oh, that actually won't work. We can't do it like that because of these reasons that I know from a conversation that we had 2 weeks ago. Instead of just like the ticket says to do X and that's what I'm going to do, right? And the product team will figure that out. So that would be my thing. It's sort of software engineers who are good coders, who are flexible and can kind of take that next level and think about the thing that they're building and how it's really going to work within the larger ecosystem.
Thank you. And Jose wants to know, what advice would you give to someone starting a government-focused development agency?
I would say seek out mentors who are in that and ask them for advice. Perhaps you should reach out to us too. And what I would say is government contracting is not for the faint of hearts. It is for lack of a better descriptor, is a den of thieves who want to slit your throat at night. But it's also a lot of fun. And so the way in is through teaming and subcontracting and forming relationships. And the way out is, the way forward is just the same thing: teaming, subcontracting, forming relationships, and doing good work.
Okay. And then Brian had a question. How did you plan to scale your hiring process in the early years? Is it like a natural progression when deciding to switch your focus from engineering to HR to accounting, or is it something that is prearranged?
The journey of our recruiting development shop is one of my favorite things that we've actually accomplished here. So the very first process that we had for hiring was literally, I would get on the phone with them and I would ask them to describe the difference between a for loop and a while loop and a few other very basic questions. And then Rob would look at their resume and he would have a conversation with them and walk through a problem. And I think there was a homework assignment in there somewhere. And then together we would talk to them about what the company was and try to convince them why they don't want the job. And we took no notes throughout this process. And that process worked to hire exactly one person. And the person we hired was great. She stayed with us for a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And it did not scale at all. And we went through a bunch of iterations. I won't tell you forward through all of them. And fast forward to today, we have, I think, three recruiters plus our head of recruiting. So that's 4 recruiters, and one of them is getting an MBA and on deck to be our head of HR. And so it's something that we've had to say, okay, this process will scale to here. And then when we get here, it needs to be broken, rebuilt, and so that it will scale to here. And then when we get there, we got to start over and build it again. And so currently we've got a fairly robust process that works, but COVID does not make it easy. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I obviously do hiring in my role, so I would love to hear more about how you built that out, because I know it can be difficult. Tamar has a question. How did you establish your culture at Oddball?
That's a great question. culture is an interesting thing within a company because every company has a culture. And the saying goes, either you work to build that culture and have it in a way that you want, or it will be done without your input, right? Like every company has a culture. There's something that we like to say, or that Travis always said really early on, was you can have a strong culture. That does not mean it's a bad culture, right? There are companies that have a very, very strong toxic culture, right? And I don't want to name names, but I'm sure we can think of some. So how did we establish our culture early at Oddball? I think it was making really key hires and making time for fun. We have a different culture than other companies, and we understand that, but we do, like, we sort of have an unofficial thing where every Friday there's a thing called Friday with Friends. The one employee started maybe 2 years ago at this point, and people meet and do a happy hour Friday, and they may be drinking beverages or coffee at 4 o'clock on a Friday night. I don't know what's in their cups, but kind of having a fun time and sort of talking through stuff. But I think it's making times for fun and really hiring around our key values, our core values. We had a chance really early on to meet with a CTO of a much larger company, and we were a 3-person company at the time. And the first thing he did, we sat us down for lunch. He says, "Hey, what are your core values at Oddball?" And Travis and I looked at each other, and we had no clue what the heck we were doing, right? Like, we're just a couple of guys who wanted to start a company. We didn't know about core values, but we kind of defined those, and we stuck to a no assholes policy pretty early on, and kind of made sure that was a core thing at our company, is making sure people align with our core values and sort of lined up with that. So Travis, I don't know if you get anything else to add there, but I just talked a little about core values. And
it's the no jerks policy, just to be clear.
I think you hit it on the head.
And we have time for one more question because we're almost done here. But Caitlin had a follow-up on the heels of the culture question. Were there any values from Codesmith that you have incorporated into Oddball?
Yeah, sure. I can kick it off. I think one of the things that I've kept from Codesmith is a lack of arrogance. I think a lot of people and engineers, not just engineers, but a lot of people in the tech industry, feeling that, like, now that they know something, they're better than people. And it's important to not bring that and to forget about that, because a lot of people may have a wide variety of different skill sets. And even if they're not so good at this thing, they're actually really good at something else, especially secondary learners, right? You might deal with somebody who, they're learning how to code, or they're a junior in that, but in their past life, they were like a designer or something like that, right? So I think it's just important to not forget what it's like not to know.
Yeah, I remember Will used to always say that. It was like, it wasn't just that, like, you shouldn't. It was like, we do not forget what it's like not to know, which I really like that phrase you always say. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is just the constant learning, just like, just not just forgetting what it's like not to know. Don't forget the fact that you kind of don't know, but you can figure it out.
Lovely.
Yeah, definitely. And for you folks who are on here, feel free to share the scholarship link, right? Like, we want this to go out. We want all the veterans. We'd love it if all of this was used in the very first cohort, right? We want to sort of help people who can make this jump. It's a big leap to sort of jump and do this. So if you know someone who'd be interested, send them a link, and don't be shy, because you're just going to be helping them.
Thank you, Rob. Well, it looks like we're at time now, but thank you both for being here. It was such a pleasure to speak with you, and a huge thank you to Oddball for offering that coding scholarship for veterans. We know it's going to make such a positive impact. And thank you to all the event attendees for coming. I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. Caitlin, was there anything else I needed to add before we let everyone go?
That is it. Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you, Rob and Travis. And thank you, Chelsea, for moderating. You did an amazing job. We couldn't have done it without you. Yeah.
Bye, everyone.